Next on Currents News, a special assignment report on the commission that Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio appointed to tackle the evil sin of racism. The findings are out now. Stopping violence against churches and worshipers. Security experts joining forces with religious leaders today to confront the dangers head on. The latest on the migrant emergency at the southern border. Tonight there are a lot of developments, and the leader of Catholic Migration Services, Father Patrick Keating, is joining us to explore them. Plus, another American tourist has died in the Dominican Republic. He was from New Jersey. The news starts right now.
Racism is an endemic thing in the United States.
Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is calling on Brooklyn's pastors and the faithful to help defeat the sin of racism. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. It's been almost 2 years since the Brooklyn Diocese launched a commission to study racism within the church. Bishop DiMarzio made the decision after racial violence erupted in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. Now that commission has presented its findings. Currents News' Tamara Lane has the story from Douglaston, Queens in this special assignment report.
Hate-filled rhetoric and violent clashes leading ultimately to a senseless death. The protest in Charlottesville, a grim reminder that racism is still very much alive in this country.
This is what democracy looks like!
The deadly altercation prompting the nation's bishops to issue a pastoral letter against racism, acknowledging what many call America's original sin and resolving to work towards its end.
All of these things need time to eliminate. It won't happen overnight. We need to change attitudes, change hearts, and understanding basically why we feel this way.
The decisions we make on sight.
Bishop DiMarzio bringing the fight home to Brooklyn, tasking a newly formed commission to tackle the evil head on, calling on Catholics of all races and backgrounds to begin the difficult conversation about race that many in the church say is long overdue.
We wanted to reach all of the people within our parishes to talk about racism.
After several listening sessions, the commission shared its findings with parish priests from all over the diocese, highlighting better communication, more participation between parishes, and a call for healing and reconciliation.
Racism is an issue that at times is very difficult to discuss, to share, and so a day like today gave them resources, gave them a way and a method of dealing with racism within their own parishes.
Racism is not just a black-white issue, it's a church, it's an entire community issue to transform and change hearts for all eternity.
One man who changed hearts and minds is Msgr Bernard Quinn, the Brooklyn priest responsible for establishing the first African-American church in the borough, St. Peter Claver, and a relentless advocate for the rights of the disenfranchised African-American community in the early part of the 20th century.
He was a Roman Catholic priest, a priest who was madly in love with Jesus, and it was this love that moved him to advocate for those who had no voice before the civil rights movement.
Msgr Quinn is now on the road to sainthood, his legacy honored at evening vespers, his cause for canonization advanced as Bishop DiMarzio accepts further documentation that will now be sent to Rome.
We dedicated this day to him because he was our hero. He was a saint. I'm sure in my heart that he was a saint. He really made a difference, and we look to him and we pray to him that we can eliminate any vestiges of racism in our own day.
The Congregation for the Causes of Saints has named Msgr Quinn a servant of God. If this new information is accepted by the Vatican, Msgr Quinn would be declared venerable, the next step on his road to sainthood. Emily?
Tamara, you're also working on another special assignment report for tomorrow. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
That's right. I was invited on a ride-along for Project Hope, an inspiring group of volunteers headed by Deacon Art Griffin. They have a special mission which really hits home for our diocese, which is the Diocese of Immigrant. I will have the story tomorrow in a special assignment report.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Religious leaders and Homeland Security experts are going on the offense against the growing dangers that are facing churches and worshipers. Current News' Tim Harfman reports on the best solutions and worst threats.
An all too familiar scene for modern-day worshipers. Attack after attack around the world at the hands of terrorists. 2019 is the bloodiest year yet for believers.
This is the world we live in, folks.
At Pace University Wednesday, religious leaders and law enforcement officials are tackling the issue head-on, discussing recent attacks and ways of preventing future terror. William Sweeney is the assistant director for the FBI's New York office.
People should understand that everybody has safety as a priority, but to maintain awareness of your surroundings, just like you would if you were walking on any street in any county, any state, any city.
He says having cameras and alarms isn't enough. Houses of worship need protocols in place to prevent attacks.
Do you know what your exit plan is? Do you know what the exits look like? Do you know what the inside of the building looks like? Have ushers talked with each other about a plan? Have ushers talked with the pastors, the monsignors, the priests?
For Alan Hausman, acts of terror hit home. He worships at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. It was October 27, 2018, when a gunman opened fire, killing 11 innocent people.
It was almost unbelievable to even think that in our small little synagogue this could happen.
They're watching in disbelief as mass shootings and bombings continue around the world.
When the other attacks we read about occur, it's almost like it takes people right back to that day.
For Alan, the Pittsburgh shooting has taken a toll on him personally.
I have good days and bad days, good hours and bad hours. Be honest with you, I still don't sleep well most evenings. My mind's just still running a million miles an hour.
But he has faith and is helping the Tree of Life Synagogue to have a plan in place.
One of our members that was killed was our greeter usher, and so it's my personal commitment to take his place and be there at the door to greet everybody.
Mr. Sweeney says worshipers shouldn't be afraid either, but they must be prepared.
Be aware of your surroundings and have a plan.
In Lower Manhattan, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
A major development tonight in the killing of Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The special investigator for the United Nations is pointing a finger at a Saudi crown prince. Mohammed bin Salman bears responsibility for the premeditated execution of Khashoggi. According to today's UN report, the first independent investigation of the murder. Khashoggi entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October of 2018 and never came out. An update now on the attack against oil tankers in the waters off the coast of Iran. The U.S. Navy is saying the limpet mine that hit at least one ship is strikingly similar to mines publicly displayed by the Iranian military. And U.S. Archbishop Timothy Berlio of the Military Archdiocese is joining Pope Francis in calling for talks to resolve U.S.-Iranian tensions. 5 years ago, a Malaysian Airlines plane was shot out of the sky and 298 people died in the Ukraine. Today, 4 people are being charged with murder for the crash, 3 Russians and a Ukrainian. According to investigators, the Russians are all linked to the country's secret military intelligence units. A missile took down the airliner in 2014. The mystery is becoming deeper tonight after a New Jersey tourist died in the Dominican Republic. Joseph Allen is the latest of 9 Americans who have lost their lives on the island. The FBI is trying to find out why the tourists are dying. Kristen Holmes reports.
We have no reason to believe that this death was of natural causes.
The family of 55-year-old Joseph Allen speaking out after he was found dead in a hotel room in the Dominican Republic last week.
I know that my brother had a fever. He complained about being really hot. His friend looked at him. He was sweating bullets. Took a shower, cooled off, said he felt a lot better. He was going to hang out that night, decided, you know what, I feel better, but I don't feel well enough to go hang out.
The New Jersey resident is the 9th American to die at a Dominican resort in the past year.
He had just gotten a physical prior to his trip. He had a clean bill of health.
Last month, an American couple from Maryland was found dead in their hotel room. According to the Dominican Republic National Police, an autopsy concluded the couple had died of respiratory failure and pulmonary edema, a condition caused by excess fluid in the lungs. Now the FBI is working with Dominican authorities assisting in further toxicology analysis. Officials in the Dominican Republic or the U.S. have not indicated that the deaths are connected. About 2.2 million American tourists visited the Dominican Republic last year, and officials in the country insist it is still safe to vacation there. Kristen Holmes, Currents News.
Congress holding hearings today on whether to give reparations to descendants of slaves. Actor Danny Glover was one of the people testifying to the House Judiciary Committee.
A national reparations policy is a moral, democratic, and economic imperative. I sit here as the great-grandson of a former slave.
The committee is considering legislation that would study the impacts of slavery and recommend reparation proposals. The hearing room was filled to capacity and Capitol Police worked crowd control. The hearing comes on an important day in American history, Juneteenth or Emancipation Day. It was on this day in 1865 that all slaves were free from their enslavers. President Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation 3 years before, but because of the Civil War, the Declaration of Freedom wasn't fully carried out. When the news of the war ending finally reached the last slavery stronghold in the nation, Texas, all slaves were free to live in one nation under God. There's a lot more news headed your way. Many developments in the migrant crisis on the south border. The leader of Catholic Migration Services, Father Patrick Keating, is joining us to explore them. A tribute to Helen Keller, the remarkable woman who overcame so much. I'll tell you about her connection to Queens and to faith. The countries with the least faith in vaccines, the results may surprise you. A breakthrough tonight in the migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border. An emergency deal in the Senate to stem the tide of people trying to get into the country. The bipartisan agreement is reached not long after President Trump warned about mass deportations. John Lawrence reports the latest.
Senators reach a $4.6 billion deal for emergency border funding.
We propose that we give those countries real aid to fight the gangs, the MS-13, the drug dealers.
The Appropriations Committee's agreement earmarks nearly $3 billion for the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Administration officials told lawmakers that department would be broke within weeks without the infusion. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants to put it on the floor next week.
I think everybody is now convinced that we have an emergency at the border, a humanitarian crisis.
On a related note,
we are building the wall. We're going to have over 400 miles of wall built by the end of next year. It's moving rapidly.
The president brought up the border crisis as he officially launched his re-election bid Tuesday in Florida, an issue many in his party say needs to be addressed immediately.
In May, we had over 140,000 illegal immigrants enter to this nation unlawfully.
On Monday, Mr. Trump tweeted that millions of migrants in the U.S. illegally will start being removed next week. Critics questioned that plan.
It's just sort of a cover for his policies that have really been a failure. And remember that under the Trump administration, the arrivals at our southern border that are unauthorized have surged.
I'm John Lawrence reporting.
Thousands of migrants are being sent back to Mexico. They're being bussed back across the border under a new expanded deal between the United States and Mexico. Many migrants cannot stay in the U.S. while waiting for their asylum cases to be decided. Mexico is providing buses for anyone who wants to return to their home countries in Central America. Undocumented immigrants found in the interior of the U.S. are being deported at a limited rate. The latest numbers reported by ICE show that the Border Enforcement Agency is averaging about 7,000 deportations per month. ICE is vowing to conduct stepped-up interior enforcement in line with President Trump's threat to deport millions who are now in the country illegally. Father Patrick Keating is the leader of Catholic Migration Services, whose mission is dedicated to welcoming the stranger in our midst. He joins us now. Father, thank you so much for being here.
So it's great to be here, Emily.
Father, how should people react when they hear the president threatening mass deportations?
I think people should always be concerned. Anything, an elected official says, I think we always need to put into the larger context and the larger framework of what the actual situation is. Because people, a lot of things are said every day, from all across the aisle, from our president to members of Congress to on the state level. And, if you react constantly on every single word, you would be almost jumping up every single moment. What I do think people need to do is to take every word seriously. He's the executive branch, but also to take it with a grain of salt. Is it in a political rally? Is it just to get a headline? Is it actual policy? So I think we need to make distinctions. What is the context? But we still take it seriously, and people should just be aware of what he's saying.
And what's the best advice for immigrants and migrants who are worried by the president's words?
I think the first thing for any immigrant or person is to know what their status is. And the best way of doing it is going to an attorney or a qualified representative that's reputable. Catholic Migration Service is the diocesan agency that handles it, but there's many other attorneys. And make sure they're reputable and just know what your status is. What dates are important? What documents should you be carrying? What documents should you always have on you? And to be prepared. There's that ad that goes back to when we were children, just be prepared for the situation. And that's what we advise all our clients and anyone that calls us or comes into our doors is be prepared and know what your status is, because knowledge is power.
Let's turn our attention over to the southern border. Some have called what's happening down there a humanitarian crisis. Do you agree?
I think we're seeing so many of the images we're seeing from both sides of the border, because the reality, a border is just a line on a map. What we're dealing with is people. And I think that's sometimes really getting lost with all of this going on. There's people, men and women, children, there's families, young and old. And you see the situation. We see large numbers of people. They're trying to leave very dangerous environments, and they're trying to make a better life for themselves. And yet there's getting caught up in the world of politics, both on a national level and then an international level between the United States and Mexico and other nations. And yet we're focusing on that, and sometimes we're losing sight that these are people that need food, they need shelter, they need just basic necessities of life. And so anytime someone's in that situation and in a rough terrain, it's critical, and we should not take that lightly.
Now, there's a lot of people that argue the American immigration system is broken. How does it get fixed?
I think the first way is for people just to take a step back and talk and use a very unpopular word, compromise. I think we need to realize the history of our nation is it's a land of immigrants, but we need to get both parties in our political system, maybe not solve everything all at once, but to say there's so many small situations that we need to look at. These are people. They're here working. They're coming here for a better life. We have in our harbor the Statue of Liberty welcoming. And yet we're also a land of a nation of laws. And how do we allow our laws to make sense? Because if you look, I studied immigration law in law school, and you look at so many of the laws, they're not logical. It's like, well, if you come on this day, you're okay. If you come on a different day, nope, you're out of status. And we're losing sight of the bigger picture, but that's how laws are written. And so often we need to revisit these laws and to say, what can we do in the situation here now? But it takes both parties to talk, not grandstand, not look for the headlines, not look for political wins, but look to serve the people that they've been called to serve.
Father, thank you so much for your time and for your insight.
Great to be here.
As Father Keating mentioned, Catholic Migration Services offers legal assistance to immigrants. They have 2 offices, one located on 191 Jeroliman Street in Brooklyn Heights. The phone number is 718-236-3000. The other office is on 4701 Queens Boulevard in Sunnyside. The number for that location is 347-472-3500. They're also online at catholicmigration.org. A new survey is showing the richest countries in the world have the lowest confidence in vaccines. The findings show that Bangladesh and Rwanda have the strongest confidence in vaccines. On the other hand, France has the lowest levels of trust, with 1/3 of its population saying vaccines aren't safe. At the same time, the Bishop of Albany, Edward Scharfenberger, is advocating for the vaccinations, telling his flock they have a moral responsibility to protect their health. Helen Keller was a remarkable woman, an author, political activist, and lecturer. She was the first deafblind person to earn a Bachelor's of Arts degree. But what most people don't know about Helen is that she was a woman of faith and also had a New York connection. Under the railroad on Askin Avenue, onlookers watch a tribute built for Helen Keller. She's a national icon, but as historian Michael Perlman explains, she's also a local one.
She was very active in Forest Hills. Every year on her birthday, she opened up her home to many Forest Hills residents.
Keller lived in this Forest Hills home for over 20 years, starting in 1917. Family friend Robert Hoff says her neighbors loved her.
It was a very lovely tutelage, considering her worldwide travels and connections. She maintained a very indigenous connection with her community and her neighbors and friends.
Now her legacy is being remembered with a 48-foot mural. It features her former home, her dogs, her words, and more. It's the brainchild of Perlman, who secured thousands of dollars to honor her legacy.
Helen Keller serves as a beacon of light and hope and inspiration to so many people, countless generations.
The tribute was done in spray paint by international muralist Crisp and Praxis.
When Helen Keller lived in Forest Hills, her house was on the property where our synagogue, the Reformed Temple of Forest Hills, is today. So it was meaningful to us to celebrate Helen Keller, not just in Forest Hills and not just with the beautiful mural, but also to have the painting of the mural take place at the exact spot where she once lived.
Her former home caught on fire and was demolished shortly after she moved. The Reformed Temple of Forest Hills now sits on that land. A fitting spot for a house of worship because Keller was deeply devoted to her Christian faith. She even wrote a spiritual autobiography entitled Light in My Darkness.
Well, Helen Keller was a woman of deep conviction. And in our synagogue, although Judaism is different than her Christianity, we all believe in the power of God and connection to other people.
Now, just minutes away from her former home, Keller's faith, determination, and strength will forever be remembered. There's also a plaque incorporated into the mural that outlines Helen Keller's many accomplishments. Still to come on Currents News, the reason why this Australian police detective took action. And patrolling the streets in California is ROBOCOP. And the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all of the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/Our-Diocesan-Family. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. A rescue team performed a miracle in upstate New York after a teen fell straight off a cliff 150 feet and then rolled 250 feet more in treacherous conditions.
Just kept falling and falling and falling until finally he hit some sort of a steel structure down there that stopped him from going all the way down to the bottom of the mountain. To get down there and have him actually talking was just unbelievable.
Captain Wood says surviving a fall from that cliff is extremely rare. In 20 years, this is only the second survival story. Officials say the climber is still in critical condition. One detective is being commended for his quick thinking after stopping a press conference to tackle a perp. That's Detective Darren Edwards, who was speaking to the media in Australia before being interrupted by the man in the red sweatshirt. The accused was being chased by another man because he was allegedly being inappropriate with his daughter. Detective Edwards heard the pursuer yelling and stopped the press conference to help. Kids in California, you better stay out of trouble because ROBOCOP is on patrol.
Good day to you.
This ROBOCOP is meant to serve just outdoors and has a 360-degree range of vision. ROBOCOP is meant to be an extra set of eyes in places where police won't have to consistently monitor. The city hopes it will serve as a deterrent to crime. That is Currents News. I'm Emily Druby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.